Welcome to the very first episode of RfR Deconstruction Stories. I'm Rob Palmer, and I'm a helpline agent for recovering from religion. Often someone reaching out to us for support in a chat or on the phone asks the RfR agent who is helping them to tell them where they stand on religious matters, or they want to know about their religious background, or to hear about their deconstruction history. Well, personal disclosure is discouraged on the helpline. So this series is intended as an online resource for people with those questions about our volunteers. Now our agents will be able to say, hey, take a look at the RfR Deconstruction Stories playlist on the Recovering from Religion YouTube channel. And for the inaugural episode of this series, I have with me today Griffin, who is the online media director for RfR and the host of RfRX Talks. That is our weekly live streamed show, for which I am often their co-host. Welcome, Kara, and thanks for doing this with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here on a day that isn't Monday, and we're recording anyway.
Yes, Monday, though, we always say the best day of the week because it's when we do RfRX. How long have we been doing that for?
Ooh, we've been doing that since lockdown, which was 2020. So 5 years?
Wow, that is astounding. We have 250 great episodes plus up on our YouTube channel now. I don't. When Eric Wells started that, I don't think he ever thought it would go beyond a month or two because this pandemic will end and we don't have to stay alive.
Yeah, we'll be back to normal. Here we still are, but I love still having the program, even though I also love not having to be in lockdown anymore, but now we get to voluntarily decide to spend Mondays virtually with each other and the rest of the community.
So Kara has been doing this a little bit longer than I have been a co-host. Or you took over directly from Eric, is that true, or am I forgetting something?
Yes, I did take over from Eric when he left. And then, because I had been co-hosting a little bit before that, so then it passed to me. And I think you had been co-hosting a little bit by that time too, right?
My recollection is very rarely. Just occasionally
Yeah.
somebody couldn't, make it at the last minute or something. They asked me to do it. But yeah, now I seem to be the weekly co-host, which is just fine with me. I'm happy doing that.
Good. I'm glad because I'm happy you're doing it too.
So, all right, let's get back to what people probably are tuning into this for. If, as I mentioned, they are recommended to watch these episodes, going through their own deconstruction, having contacted recovering from religion. So, what's your background in all that?
Oh, yeah. So my religious background is in what we would now call the evangelical fundamentalist Christian community. So what that means to me is we came from Southern Baptist sort of beliefs. We did go to some Southern Baptist churches. We changed churches a fair bit, but it was always between Southern Baptist or what they call Bible churches or non-denominational, which is very similar to Baptist when it comes to doctrine. But the idea is with the non-denominational churches, or at least the ones that we went to, they are kind of decentralized when it comes to leadership. There's not necessarily an organizational structure that is appointing the ministers and that they have to all agree on the doctrine and all that kind of thing. But their statements of faith or belief usually are very similar to Baptist. And then we also did, on top of that, we had a lot of church in our family. On top of that, I went to a church school for pre-K through middle school, and that was I believe, Assemblies of God was the denomination there. So that was where we got to be slain in the spirit and have demons cast out and that kind of thing. And
Did
then
you
on,
witness that? Did you witness
oh
demons being
yeah.
cast out?
Oh, yeah, that was like a normal thing that would happen at those services. And sometimes we would have to all go to a service. They had a big church. This was in Texas, and the church that we had our school at, it was part of a church, obviously, and that church was affiliated with or shared a parking lot with what ended up being the TBN network broadcasting center. That's the Trinity Broadcasting Network, I believe is what it's called. And their broadcasting center headquarters building that our church and school shared a parking lot with was built to look like a replica of the White House, like an exact replica of the White House, but a little bit smaller. It had a miniature Oval Office and everything inside. They took us on a tour of it. And that was also part of what we kind of had access to, or were exposed to, I should say. And even though the Assemblies of God church that we were associated with was a little bit different theologically than what our family believed, we still, had to go to those services and get taught at that school. So we got all that. In addition to, we did the homeschool program at home of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, the IBLP, which is Bill Gothard's program, the one that the Duggars and those people that you may have seen on TV were a part of. So we had a lot.
This feels like, the highest level of indoctrination one can have. I mean, tell me, what, the White House? What does this have to do with religion? Why did they do that?
Great question. I think we're seeing why now here in 2025.
Way back when, this was a precursor to that movement then.
Yes. I think that what a lot of people may not know is that among some of the, very kind of fundamentalist evangelical churches and families, this has been a goal for a long time. And when I say this, I mean basically getting into political power in a way that they are able to legislate their version of what morals and laws and societal norms ought to be. And this is what they have been training people up for literally generations. And so this was the plan. If you can get in charge of the government, then, you can make all those evil women stop having abortions and all those, queer people go away and get back in the closet and, get, converted to being straight and all of this kind of thing. So that was the plan. I couldn't tell you exactly how they would have described the reason for why they built their TV station broadcasting center to look like the White House. I don't know what they said the reason was, but they may have told us and I forgot because I was a kid. But I always thought it was very strange.
I'm sorry, even back then when you were indoctrinated, you thought that was an oddity.
I did. I didn't understand. I was like, but why does it look like the White House? And they didn't like me asking a lot of questions, so,
Did they have a replica of Jesus sitting in the chair behind the big desk in the Oval Office?
I don't think they did. They did take us on a tour of the Oval Office after they finished building the building, and we all got to come and go through the building and see it. And they explained that it was ever so slightly smaller than the real Oval Office because it would be some kind of violation of something to make it the same size. I don't know if they meant a legal violation or in their minds there was some kind of theological violation that would have been. I have no idea.
Well, I have to wonder if that's still there, if now they're bulldozing part of it, the White House, to make a little ballroom.
Yeah, they're going to have to take off, just a piece of it.
Okay. So, all right. So you were in it deep then. When did you start having, what made you start having questions? When did you start having questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess in one sense, I always had questions, which is why I didn't fit in great with the whole program. There were parts of it that never sat right with me. In particular, a lot of the rules about how you're supposed to act if you are designated. You're a woman, you're a girl, you're a boy, you're a man. You act like this. You do these things. It's very, very strictly prescribed. Not just, they wouldn't even call them gender roles because they don't recognize the concept of gender as a thing. But it's very strictly laid out that, your job is going to be to dress in this way and behave in this way and do these things in your life. And the first thing that bothered me about that was, they, of course, these are fundamentalist, Bible literalists, and so they had us reading the actual Bible, and it would have passages about things like how women were and were not to adorn themselves, and these may or may not be in alignment with the dress codes that they were giving us. And I was just from the beginning like, this doesn't really make sense. Like, it would talk about jewelry that women might wear in one place, and then in another place be saying, don't adorn yourself with braids in your hair. And, now we're in school being told you can't have piercings, but your hair needs to be braided. And I'm like, wait a minute. This isn't biblical. Yes, it is. You need to be honest and stop arguing. So it never made sense to me in the first place in a lot of ways. But you mentioned, you're right on target when you mentioned that it was a very, very deep indoctrination, in that even though it didn't make sense to me and I hated all of it just about, I wasn't aware that there were other options available. It was, this is the right path. This is what God tells us. There's no other option. This is the Bible. This is what we're reading out of. This is what we're teaching you out of. And if you don't agree, shut up. You're wrong. And anything other than this is Satan. And you don't want to go to hell, do you? And, these people are all evil and awful and worldly. It wasn't presented as if there were choices. The Catholics are going to hell. All of the other Christian denominations have wrong theology. This is the only path. And of course, we weren't allowed to learn about things like science in school.
So were you raised as a Bible literalist? Old Testament is correct. There was Adam and Eve, and the earth is 6,000-ish years old, and there was Noah's flood?
Yep, absolutely. That was all literally true. That happened. Any science book that tells you otherwise is a pack of lies from Satan. And not just the global flood, too. There was like the Tower of Babel that, that's a literal place that they had to get struck down because of their hubris to think they were going to build something that tall to go to heaven. And that's why people speak different languages now, is because of that story. So anybody that teaches you anything different about linguistics, also wrong.
Why has God not stricken down the International Space Station, which took a bunch of countries to build, and it's much higher than the Tower of Babel would have been?
See, these are the questions, Rob, that you get in trouble for asking.
or we have like Google Translate now, where you can just freaking get rid of the fact that everyone speaks a different language on planet Earth because of the Tower of Babel, and you can actually read other documents in other languages and even communicate with people.
Oh, when you have an answer like that, usually the response would end up being, well, yes, and that's how we're getting closer and closer to the end times. So,
Of course.
Yes.
So, but speaking of that, was that part of it, the rapture?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. And this was one of the few areas where they would brook like some amount of theological disagreement. Now, I think that's because none of their, timelines make sense if you're reading the Bible literally. So it's really hard for people to come down on each other, saying, no, you've got your tribulation timeline wrong, although they would. But there was always this kind of air of, well, we don't know for sure because, as the Bible tells us, no one can know the exact time and date that Jesus will be returning, and you're not supposed to try and guess. That's a sin. But the book of Revelation is the only one that you're specifically told you'll be blessed for studying. So you should study it and kind of act like you're telling people what the future is going to be. But just remember, we will also criticize you because no one can know the time and date, and you shouldn't be trying to do that. Don't test God.
So what did they think about all these predictions that have been made by Christian pastors over the, I say centuries, but definitely decades, where there's big bulletin boards up, the end is this date?
Oh, yeah, they would say those are false prophets. You are not to be able to predict the exact date and time. Those are the ones that they would for sure be saying. That is extra biblical. That is not what we believe. You can't know. And if you think you know, you must be a false prophet because God already said you're not going to know.
There's been a lot of false prophets on TikTok this last month or so.
There sure have. They seem to keep coming up over and over again. But for some reason, among the crowd I grew up in, that would be considered wrong. But it's not wrong to just say vaguely, well, we're getting closer to the end times, and here's another sign, and oh, this new thing, we're having wars and rumors of wars. That means it's a sign that the end times are coming soon. But as long as you don't say the exact date, I guess it's okay to just say soon. To which I then had the the question. They would often say, not even soon, like something that was common in our family was someone would say something along the lines of, well, that just goes to show we're getting closer to the end times. And I would be like, right, but if time is linear, then no matter what's happening, and if the end times happen at the end in the future, like every day we're closer to that date, right? Regardless of the wars and the rumors of wars. So, like, what are you actually saying? But they didn't like those questions either.
And they would say, "Shut up, Kara, shut up."
Yeah, exactly. I got told that a lot. Still do. That's okay.
Have you seen the series Young Sheldon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, on occasional episodes, his mother drags him to church, and the pastor is making some sermon about that. He raises his hand. How could they possibly fit all those animals? Shut up, Sheldon.
I love it. Yes.
So was that you? Was that you? Did you do that?
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. It was frowned upon. Well, and also, this is where a little bit of the anti-intellectualism comes from as well. Something that we learned in our school in particular was, the Bible tells you to trust in God and lean not on your own understanding. And so whenever someone is having questions or pointing out, logical inconsistencies or places in the Bible where there may be contradictions, this is the response that you get. You're actually sinning by setting yourself up as if you think you know more than God. The Bible says to trust in God and lean not on your own understanding. And so by trying to figure this out or noticing these inconsistencies, you are being, ridiculously arrogant. How dare you think that you are smarter than God and that you could question him? Which it's all circular in the end, basically.
So that's a lot of stuff to get out of your head and recover from. So was it just the gender roles thing, or was it all of that? Like the science didn't make sense, or they said science doesn't make sense and it's all lies. Like what would you attribute as different percents of what made you decide it's just not worth following this religion?
Yeah, I guess there were kind of different layers to it for me. Like I mentioned how all of the rules around gender never worked for me ever because I'm non-binary, and so I don't really follow along with a lot of the scripts that are for people who are assigned female at birth. And I've always been that way, and that didn't sit right with anybody involved in this program very well. So I kind of, for that reason, always felt like it wasn't a good fit for me, but I thought that it was all true, right? Because of the indoctrination, even though I didn't find it to be worth following, it did not seem to be enriching my life in any way. I thought that it was true, and so therefore the alternative was, well, you can go to hell, I guess, which was not a great goal. So I was like, well, I don't want that. I didn't like it, but it was presented to me as the only thing that could possibly be true. And as I mentioned, we were kind of prevented from learning about any alternatives. You couldn't go to other churches if they believed the wrong thing. You certainly couldn't go to a science class that wasn't, supervised by a, religious person. They taught us in the biology class one year in the school that I went to. I wasn't yet old enough to be in the biology class by this time, but they used that of Pandas and People textbook that was just the intelligent design argument.
The famous one that was in the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial.
That's the one. They had that textbook because, you can't be teaching people about evolution. Next thing they're going to be questioning whether Noah's flood happened. And, we know that it did. So, haha. Gotcha. So for a long time, I was kind of stuck with, I didn't like it at all, but I thought that it was true and that there wasn't an alternative. Then I did the thing that they all warn you against. I got away and I went to college.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how they get you. Those liberal colleges teach you about things like science.
The Ark Encounter has a lot of exhibits inside of it, besides just the animals in cages, including dinosaurs. But one of the final exhibits, if you're going through an order, is the horrible modern world where people go to college and learn these things. and therefore disbelieve in the flood, and therefore the entire story of God's creation of the earth.
Yeah, and well, it kind of does all fall to pieces if you teach people that those stories are literally true and that that is a historically accurate account of the history of the planet. The whole thing's going to come crumbling down pretty quickly once people find out, oh, the Earth is not 6,000 years old. There was not a global flood that took place 4,000 years ago. We have written records and structures that, were being constructed, across the time period that would have been both before and after this alleged flood took place. I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And not even to mention the biology of, you cannot repopulate the entire planet with, two specimens of all of these species 6,000 years or 4,000 years ago, whenever the flood was supposed to have happened. I mean, it all starts to fall apart. And that's what happened for me when I went to college. Every time I would have a new class and a new topic, I would learn some other way that this, fantastical account of reality didn't make any sense. Like, taking an astronomy class and we're learning about just the amount of time it takes light from other stars to get to the Earth. And I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. That doesn't add up. Like, were they all here just the Earth just plopped in, fully formed in the middle of a universe that is quite a bit older than that? No, that doesn't really track. And then I take a archaeology class, and we learn about Neanderthals and human evolution, and I'm like, well, this goes back way more than 6,000 years. Hold on a minute.
And your degree is in?
So now my degree in grad school, I went back to grad school for anthropology, and so now I kind of work as an archaeologist, and yeah, did the whole PhD and everything in anthropology, much to the consternation of the people who say, trust in God and lean not on your own understanding, because I certainly don't think of myself as an expert on very many things, but in the course of pursuing a graduate degree, you do have to learn a little bit about a lot of things, and those don't jive up with the story that Genesis is telling about the origin of the earth and humankind.
So, of course, as you're learning all this stuff, you were able to impart this wisdom to your family who were still in the other religion, and they all realized the error of their ways, right?
Oh yeah, they all deconverted immediately.
Great story. Okay, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course
So we
not.
get a lot of people, as you know, who call and they're really angry because they've decided this stuff doesn't make sense, and their family and friends won't even listen to them. So did you go through that?
Yes, I went through a lot of in my case, and I think this is common for a lot of people in the more like fundy church backgrounds. There's a lot of judgment from the family members. It's a very judgmental kind of way of thinking. I think it really there's kind of an embrace of a lot more of the Old Testament God teachings than there are in some of the more progressive churches that tend to, tell you a lot more about what Jesus says and how Jesus loves people. But in the fundy backgrounds, at least the ones I was in, we spend a lot of time in the Old Testament, and Old Testament God is the one you need to be praying to and worshiping and hoping don't get smoted by, smited, smitten, um, struck by lightning. And so people really take it upon themselves to, remind you that you are going against God and you are a sinner and everything you are doing is bad. And you're definitely going to hell and you're dragging people down with you. How dare you? So there was a lot of that, especially because I ended up getting divorced from my husband, who I married at a very young age. I got married when I was 18.
And I presume you were married in the faith, as they say?
Yes, yes. And so that didn't sit well, also, with a lot of folks in my family and my background. Not my entire family. It was some people were more invested in this than others. Like my brother is also an atheist, and he was, actually, I was about to say he was also pretty much immediately upon going to college, but that might not actually be true. I think his deconversion may have started earlier than that, but of course he wouldn't have been allowed to say so. Um, I'm gonna have to ask him about that. But so obviously he was supportive. There were just uh, the people that are still today in my family that are very much invested in this belief system still are, and I think it is very threatening to people when they start seeing that someone in their close orbit is leaving or having doubts, or as they like to say, asking questions. And I would often say, I'm not asking questions, I am telling you things that I think and things I have noticed that do not make sense about this information you're trying to tell me. And that would always get, reframed back to me as, well, I hear that you're having a question about how this or that. No, I do not have a question. I am making a clear statement. I think this is not true. But
Did you start to get and you were never a true Christian?
so interesting question. That only came up when pressed. I did have a conversation about that with someone in my family, where I said, how do you square this circle when there is, on the one hand, this belief that we grew up with, which is you're once saved, always saved, which means in this version of the doctrine, you can't lose your salvation. This was one of the big talking points that our church would say about, this is how we know the Catholics are wrong. Sorry, Rob. Because they would always say, well, they have this wrong
Yeah,
theology.
I mean, if you do something wrong and miss confession, and died before you did that, goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. And they
Yeah.
were, so this gave people a lot of anxiety. And I remember having conversations with one of our teachers about this, because, of course we had Bible class every day in this school that I went to, because, that's the most important thing to learn about. And, because they weren't teaching science, I can tell you that.
This is the
But,
one thing Catholics have an advantage of in that regard. We didn't take Bible study. You don't read from the Bible, you just listen to the pre-sermons. So in that
oh,
regard, we're not exposed to the contradictions that I don't understand why evangelical Christians who do Bible study don't see, like the stories you told about, and even the moral horrors of the God of the Old Testament. Like, do they just skip those parts of the Bible in Bible study and don't talk about them?
so yes and no. I think it depends. We were not necessarily going into the Bible class and learning about, I take that back. I was about to say we weren't going into the Bible class and learning about Lot and his wife and his daughters, but that's not true. We did learn about that in Bible class, and
So they mentioned that he turned his daughters over to the crowd rather than just to protect the supreme angels who hypothetically could have snapped their fingers and gone away.
yep.
Supernatural beings. He gave his quote unquote virgin daughters to the mob to be raped, and they. So what would you think when you heard that this is being taught as a good thing, that God likes this guy Lot? He's the best guy in the town.
So yeah, this is one of the key issues that I started having problems with, is because a lot of times, we would, go over the Bible stories in class, and they would be like, okay, we're going to read chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. We're going through the whole story, but we're not necessarily lingering on certain parts. And we're going to talk more about, let's talk about why Lot's wife got turned into a pillar of salt, because she was a disobedient woman. And we would focus in on those little pieces.
Just to
But
interject, the really weird thing is I never heard about the daughter's part of it. I heard about the wife, and okay, yeah, she disobeyed God, she deserved it somehow. I was convinced of that, but we never had to think about the daughters being raped. I don't.
so the way that was kind of quickly, run through was basically like they were sinning. They were being sinful by disobeying their father's wishes. Oh wait, this is the part where they got pregnant. A second story that was the problem. The first story where he tries to send them out instead of the angels. I think because we were so young, I didn't quite understand what was happening in that story. at all, and it was not really dwelt upon. We just kind of went by it, and it was always a focus on, now, sometimes things that are happening in the Bible, may sound a little different or scary because it was a different time, and all those people were real sinful and bad, the ones that are the bad guys in the story. But what we need to focus on is the lesson that God has for us, from this chapter, which is about you need to trust in God, or, whatever it was. And they would make it all, happy and fluffy. And then whenever, this is the part where I really started to have issues with it, whenever you would bring up something like, hey, this is terrible, and this is a thing that the good guys, the quote-unquote good guys in the story are doing, and it would always kind of get explained as, well, they had to do that because even though, the world is imperfect, but God told them to do that because he had a plan, and this was a part of the larger plan, and those other people deserved it because they were sinful and bad. But then it would always be, but look, we need to focus on, sometimes the people that were doing things in the Old Testament that are bad, God wasn't saying that he approved of that. They were doing that, and they were bad people, and they were doing bad things. But the problem is with stories like Lot, where the text literally, or the translation of the text that we have, literally describes him as, I can't remember the phrasing exactly, but something like, the last righteous man that was left, or the most righteous man that lived in the land.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
then,
a low bar if you're the one sending your virgin girls out to be raped by the village.
well, exactly. And the problem is, it's very easy to gloss over this when you have like the Bible study class together. But when they also teach, these are biblical literalists, you are instructed to go home and read your Bible. Everyone should have read their Bible, cover to cover as many times as you can, do that all the time, read it every night. So I did. And when I was in around middle school, I started in Genesis, and I did eventually make it all the way through. I took a break in the middle of like Isaiah to go on to the New Testament because I
You
was
didn't
getting
read that
bogged
part
down.
where it's all the begats, did you? That goes on forever.
Oh yeah, I did every bit of it. I read it all. But the problem is, it doesn't take but a minute to get into some problems in Genesis. And if you're sitting there reading it yourself without someone telling you, oh yeah, and then skip over to this chapter where we can see that, the lesson God wants for you from this is, don't question him or you'll turn into salt. Um, you get into the stuff where you're like, okay, and then Lot sends his daughters, or I can't remember, it was like they had some other women in there with them that they sent out to be brutally attacked by the men that were coming to this place they were staying, that they wanted to attack the angels for some reason. But he sends them out instead, and then she comes back and is dead on the front doorstep, and then chops her up into a bunch of pieces and mails the pieces of her off to the tribes of Israel. And then the story later goes on, and he's, having relations with his daughters, and I'm reading this and I'm like, wait a minute. What? So I went we had a like Wednesday night Bible study group that we went to, that was separate from school. It was one that was affiliated with the church. So it was church all day, every day. Like, you had church at school, church at church, church activities at night, church things that you had to do at home. It was like all Bible stuff all the time. So I went to the next Bible study and brought up this story and was like, hey, have y'all read this? And the leader of the Bible study, that was like a young man that was like a brand new like youth teacher, was just kind of, I don't know if he was stunned by it or was like, this is what they prepared me for. I'm ready to explain this away. And the answer was just not satisfactory. He basically said, oh yeah, sometimes there are difficult passages in the Bible, and it's important to think about those in context, and it just didn't explain anything, basically. And I continued reading, of course, and it goes off the rails fast and stays off the rails for like much of the Old Testament. And that was another part where I just started to realize something isn't right here. This is not adding up. This isn't even the text doesn't match what they've been telling us, what they're describing about how God is and what the rules are for people and what things are okay to do and not okay to do, does not match what is in this book that they are claiming we're biblical literalists, and the only thing we would ever tell you is what the Bible tells you. And I'm like, the Bible is saying some really wild stuff. I'm not buying it. And y'all are too, but it's just they're not always the same wild claims.
So did you express these concerns to people in your family as well as to people who were in charge of teaching you this?
Not too much, because the problem is, if you're having questions, you're immediately on the radar for, oh, this person needs extra attention, right? We have to explain to you, why you're sinful and wrong, and there you are, leaning on your own understanding again. So it really wasn't the kind of thing that you're encouraged to have that kind of a conversation about. You're, of course, supposed to have your family Bible studies and talk about the Bible together, but you're supposed to talk about what God taught you from that lesson, not, I have questions about the accuracy of this document. That's not
definitely. I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage to being raised Catholic. We didn't have to believe in. Ooh.
Oh, sorry, I turned my camera off for a second. Got blurry.
Yeah, I didn't know if I lost you. So we didn't have to believe in the, clearly Catholics some time ago were Bible literalists too, but then it transformed over time. I don't know the whole history of that, but by the time I was raised in 12 years of Catholic school, we were not told the Old Testament was literal. There were metaphors of this sort, and we taught, we learned about evolution and that things weren't that questioned. And as I said, we didn't go into the stories and read the details of Sodom and Gomorrah or Job or any stuff like that. It was all New Testament, like God is love and that kind of stuff mostly. So I didn't have those same kind of struggles about what they're telling us makes no sense. So I'll say in one regard that would make it harder to leave the religion because there's not that much to push back on except for this. Well, there's the Trinity and they have to be, and there's a heaven and hell, right? Where I would think it would be easier for somebody in the modern world who's evangelical Bible literalist specifically to see all the problems and to leave. But yet it seems like the evangelical movement is getting stronger. So that's odd to me.
Yes, I know what you mean. I think that perhaps for some people there's an appeal to it in that it is very, very structured. And it does appeal to this kind of nostalgia about, traditional values, even though the values that they're talking about are in some cases things that are very recent, or things that have changed multiple times. Are you or are you not allowed to get divorced? How long does your skirt have to be? Is it okay to wear 2 sets of earrings in the same ear? These are things that people will die on that hill, and then 10 years later, we're pretending like no one ever cared about that. But I think that the kind of appeal to this sense of traditionalism is something that a lot of people like. And one of the other pieces of it that I sort of alluded to earlier, but I didn't experience it this way. When I talked about how it was presented to me as though this had to be true and there wasn't any other option, therefore there's nothing else to explore, that felt like I was trapped to me. But in talking to some of the other people in my family who don't want to leave this belief system, I think that feels very safe to have this sense of absolute 100% certainty, and to be able to say, I know that everything I believe about what's going to happen to the planet and humanity in the future is absolutely sure. I can be 100% positively certain of that. I know that everything that's going on in my life is part of God's plan, no matter how bad it is or how awful things seem. I know that if I pray and obey God, everything's going to work out and I'm going to go to heaven and I'm on the right side of history. And I don't have to worry about not being sure of things. We don't have to learn about all these scary new technologies because it doesn't matter. Everything we need to know is already in the Bible. And it's this sense of absolute certainty and security, which of course it's a false sense of that. Those things are not absolutely true. You know, we can actually know for certain that some of the stories in the Bible did not happen historically, or we can come as close to certainty about that as one is able to do. But for some people, I think the piece of it that is so appealing is the security, and I kind of took that to be part of the reason that it made people so upset sometimes when I didn't want to believe it anymore, because it was kind of pulling on those threads a little bit and saying, no, there is doubt here, and that cannot be tolerated. And I think that's why the questions aren't really welcomed either, because you're taking away people's sense of absolute positive certainty if you are allowed to question it.
So the thoughts that went through your head about questioning all these things, in your case, overruled all of that, kind of the thing you get out of the confidence that you're correct and all that, because, yeah.
Yeah, I never, like, to me, if it was all absolutely true and correct, that would be awful. I didn't like it. It didn't serve me. It had instructions for me that didn't work for me in my life. And also the Old Testament God is scary and mean and terrible. And it's internally inconsistent. So I was that person that was like, okay, if this is all technically true, you know, how do we make sense of the fact that in one place we're being told to dress and adorn ourselves in this way, and in the other place we're being told that's a sin? Which one is it? You know, and then they come up with this, well, you know, when you study it more, when you grow up, and if you go to seminary or your husband can teach you, you know, why that makes sense. You know, I'm sorry, no, that doesn't work for me. But yes, I think that is something that was different for me. I never experienced it as a sense of security or safety. It was always something that was forced upon me that was negative. So when I found out that it obviously wasn't even accurate either, and the people are acting terrible towards me when I let them know this, I'm like, why would I stay? Like, there's nothing at all to attract me to this belief. So yeah, I'm good.
So yeah, so as you mentioned, you got married in the faith, and then that broke up partly because of the religion, maybe, and then yeah.
Yeah, I think it was not necessarily that we were having conversations about that, but more that I was no longer organizing my life around that framework, and particularly in what the expectations were about people's roles in the marriage. I had never wanted to have children, for instance, and my husband did, and we had gone into the relationship with the understanding that since I didn't want that, we weren't going to, but there's this belief that, you know, women don't know their own minds and they'll just, you know, change them in the future, so we don't have to worry about what they're saying right now. They don't really mean that. It doesn't matter. And of course, we'll have lots of children and I'll be barefoot and pregnant and not work or have a job, and, you know, and then that wasn't what was happening. So that didn't work out.
Okay. And so, how long after that did you get into the mode of supporting causes like recovering from religion?
Oh, it was actually several years. So I guess I wasn't believing for quite some time, maybe, oof. I'm not one of those people that can point to the exact moment that they stopped believing. It was just kind of like over time, I realized, yeah, none of this is right. I'm just gonna leave this aside. But it was probably close to 10 years before I actually started working through, I think, what we call deconstruction, I guess, which is slightly different than deconversion, not the same thing, but I didn't really sit down and start thinking about unpacking a lot of the associated beliefs that had come along with the indoctrination until years later. I had just kind of stopped believing. I wasn't practicing anymore, and kind of set that aside and tried to not get in arguments with people about it for a number of years. And I actually, for much of that time, I still had a lot of the indoctrinated sort of fear. Like people oftentimes talk about not believing anymore, but they're still afraid of hell.
That's
Um,
as we've talked about in RfR. That's a one of the largest percentage of people who it might not be their main topic, but it often comes up, right? A large
yes.
percent of people have rationalized that they don't believe the doctrine anymore, but that has still been instilled in them in such an emotional way that they can't let go of that easily.
Yes, I definitely had that. Not in the sense of like how some people will have like nightmares that they've gone to hell or something like that. But what I had was just this feeling of if I say it out loud that I don't believe, it would be this like just sort of internal embodied sense of dread, that I was like, "Ooh, let me not say that out loud." I don't know if it was because it made it seem real, or if it was just that they taught us over and over again that saying verbally that you believe or don't believe is how you get saved or go to hell, right? Like the way you get saved is you have to say out loud, or in your head, I guess, when you do your sinner's prayer, you have to say it just right, or it doesn't work. And then there's all the stories about how Peter betrayed Jesus by saying he didn't know him, and saying that you believe or don't believe is kind of a big theme in at least the parts of the Bible that we focused on a lot. So for me, that was the hurdle that I had to sort of work to get past. And I started watching programs like the ACA, and hearing people argue and debate about this stuff, and that was
For people
tremendously
who
helpful.
don't know, what is that acronym?
Oh, yeah. So the atheist community of Austin has a lot of live stream shows, and they were kind of the big name in that for years. At least I'm from Texas, so that was a big deal in my area. And so just listening to like Matt Dillahunty argue with people and other people come on and tell their experiences really helped me start thinking about the fact that those were experiences that I had had too, or those were questions that I had kind of thought about and just put to the side or compartmentalized. But it was an opportunity for me to listen to those shows and think through those things a little bit more intentionally, even though I had left them aside for some years. I hadn't really unpacked them and thought about all of the associated beliefs and assumptions that came with them, that I also needed to unpack.
So that's what
Uh,
we call deconstruction.
yes, exactly. So that started probably 10 years later after I technically deconverted. That was a
Okay.
really long-winded answer to your question.
No,
Sorry.
so that's good. So, and by the way, I think I've seen you on some of those ACA shows now. So, like, how did
Yes.
that happen? Watching those shows for years and years, and then you become a co-host.
That was super exciting for me. That felt like an achievement, and it was not because I wanted to be internet famous. I do not, and will not be reading any of the comments on this video if there are any. Sorry. But it felt like I had really done a lot of work to think through those things, and had gone from the point where I would have felt some kind of twinge of fear inside my body to say, I'm not a Christian, I don't believe in God, I think the Bible is not true and accurate, other than as a piece of literature, to where I'm going on a show and talking people through getting themselves to where they're able to think about it in that way. That was big personal progress for me. So yeah, and it was a lot of fun.
Which of the shows have you been on?
So let's see. I have been on. There used to be a show called Secular Sexuality. I co-hosted for that one a good bit. And then I went on the nonprofits a few times, and Truth Wanted? Wait, or was it Talk Heathen? Oh shoot, now I'm getting mixed up. They have allowed me to come on a few times, and it seems like because my background is in anthropology and archaeology, it always ends up being the episode where somebody calls in about Noah's Ark and Nazi archaeology. So, which is fine. We can talk
Not
about
sure I
that.
know what Nazi archaeology is. What? is that?
Well, I don't think they're connected together, although someone could probably
What's that
connect those in their mind. But you get a lot of pseudo archaeologists talking about Noah's Ark and thinking that they have found Noah's Ark, or more like trying to convince other people that they have found Noah's Ark, or people trying to convince themselves that it has been found. You just can't see it because it's underneath an ice sheet that moves a lot, like every year. And we can't have pictures of it because the photographs that someone allegedly took got stolen out of their mom's garage by the Soviets. And I'm not even exaggerating. These are some of the claims that have been made. And yeah, it's interesting to see the knots people will tie themselves up in to try and continue to believe that these stories are literally true, when, to your point, there are other options. You can be religious and just take the parts of the book that serve you.
I cannot believe how often I will hear a caller to the ACA shows or the ones from the line, and they're a Christian, where it's like you atheist belief in evolution, and like only atheists believe in evolution. No, the entire Catholic Church is fine with that, as are a lot of other denominations. Like, what are you talking about?
And, I think you may have hit on something there. I think this may be part of the reason that there's so much of this sort of business of, none of the other denominations are going to heaven. They're all wrong. They all have wrong theology. Because if you accept that, well, they could still be going to heaven, and they believe in evolution, that starts to unravel everything. Because, part of the reason that you can't learn about science and biology is because, all of those atheists infiltrated science back in, the 19th century, and Darwin's whole goal was to make everyone an atheist, and he was trying to tear down Christianity, and they have it set up as this combat between science and the church. And the idea was that these scientists, they were obviously influenced by Satan or demons or something, and their goal was to disprove God. And although it may have been a consequence of the knowledge that they gained, that we discovered that, some of the stories that are written in the Bible could not have literally occurred, if we understand, these new facts about the world, it is, I don't think, fair to say that scientists are out to disprove God. It just so happens that the Bible does a pretty good job of that all by itself. You just have to read it, and, go out into the world, and you can discover pretty quickly that it doesn't all match up if you're thinking of it as being literally true in a description of the natural world and human history. It just doesn't add up. But you could believe otherwise and still be religious, but not in these fundamentalist circles, because then you're leaving aside some of those core elements of it. And maybe that takes away some of that sense of security and certainty, where we know everything there is to know. There is nothing more to learn. And this is it. I have the book and everyone else is wrong, which is not a great way to learn new things, in my opinion. But, they didn't ask me.
All right, so you did the ACA shows. Was that before or after your involvement with Recovering from Religion?
That was actually around the same time. So I started watching the ACA shows and some of the other podcasters like Seth and Hemet and Jimmy Snow and all of them. I was watching a lot of those, and I was hearing about Recovering from Religion. A lot of those shows promote RfR on their program, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm gonna go and go into the online chat. And then I found out about RfR that way. And then I started attending, during the pandemic, I started attending the RfRX shows on Monday nights. And I thought, this is really cool. I love this community. I can come in here and talk about this like weird fear I used to have about not being able to say out loud that I'm not a Christian anymore. And there's other people that are having that same experience. This is so cool. And so I started volunteering, during the pandemic. And then around that same time, some folks from the ACA called me up a little bit after that and were like, hey, we saw you on Recovering from Religion. Would you be interested in talking with us about, some of the topics that you discussed over there? And then it just kind of developed from that.
Oh, yeah, so that's cool. I had no idea that you had kind of the first toe into the waters of Recovering from Religion were watching the show that you then became the host of.
Yes, yes, it was like full circle. And I think that was part of the reason too that I mentioned it felt like, a really big, personal development where I had gone from being, the person that needed to receive the services to someone that was able to help provide those services to other people. And so that was nice. And we see people do that, I think, all the time here at RfR as well.
So you wanted to spend a little bit of time on like what you went through to become a volunteer.
Sure. So I initially filled out my application online, which you can do by going to the volunteer tab at recoveringfromreligion.org. I'm sorry, I'm doing your job. This is your show. But I filled out the volunteer tab on the RfR website, and then they called me back to have an interview and asked me, a lot of questions. How did I find out about it? Why did I want to volunteer?
So who was it? Was it the same person who interviewed me? Was it Anthony Magnabosco?
No, it wasn't. It was someone else. And I'm blanking on who it was right now, but I don't think they are still doing the interviews anymore. I think it was Todd.
Okay, he used to run the whole kit and caboodle.
Yes, I
Yes.
think that's who it
Yeah, that
was.
doesn't surprise me. Then when he retired from that, he like 10 people took his position because he was doing so much work.
Yes, it must have been so much work. I don't know how people get all that done.
All
We
right,
have a lot.
so you filled out that, you got interviewed, you got accepted, and then you
I
got
got
trained
accepted.
as a helpline agent by somebody.
Yes, it was Rob. I remember doing our calls and we had to have practice conversations where I had
Yeah,
to like talk
yeah.
to you about, you would pretend to have a certain kind of irrational belief or be stuck in a thought
Yeah,
process. That was
I like to
actually a lot
think
of
of it
fun.
as like when a pilot gets trained to be, you say it's a commercial pilot, right? You spend hours and hours in a simulator where the cockpit's got all the same controls and whatever, but it's just, a big thing on the ground. It's not really flying, and there's people outside who are throwing problems at you, and you have
Yes.
to understand what's the appropriate way to handle them.
Yes, and it was great. I thought that was a lot of fun actually. Um and then they turned me loose onto the helplines, and I did that a little bit. But what I actually got into more around the same time was two things. I started moderating in the online community, and
And
this was
what is that? What is the online community?
so that is an online platform where clients of RfR can have conversations with others in channels that are dedicated to chatting about topics of mutual interest. And what you'll find in there are other RfR clients and moderators.
Car-
Um, I'm
Kara's
doing the
just
commercial.
Kara's laughing because we have a script that we read every week on RFX Talks, and this is pretty much it.
Yeah. No, that's funny. But actually, so what it is, as I said, there are a bunch of different channels that you can go into and talk about different topics. And so some of those topics have to do with like people who came from the same religious background as you. Like maybe you want to talk about, okay, did anybody else have to go to this like fundy summer camp? I need to unpack this with someone. And you want to talk to other people that are from that background. Or they have ones that are specifically for men, where you're going to talk about like men's issues or women's issues or LGBTQ plus issues, and lots of different channels where you can just go into and be like, oh, look, other people talking about the same weird thing that I had happen or question that I've been having. And so the channels that I went into and started moderating for, because back in the day, I don't think it's still the same way, but back then, each channel had its own dedicated moderators, and so you might just mod for that channel, or maybe you have more than one channel that you're associated with. And so I was moderating the LGBTQ plus channel and I can't remember if it was the sexuality or sex and gender. I think the name of it may have changed. But I was moderating for those two. And that was around the time I had started on secular sexuality for the ACA, and was really involved in that particular aspect of it, because as I mentioned earlier, for me, my gender identity was the thing that was always a mismatch with the religious teachings, and that was always such a big source of grief and conflict with family and teachers and everything like that. And that is the case for a lot of people who are members of the LGBTQ plus community. Oftentimes that's a really big sticking point for them, where they end up having a lot of shame and guilt kind of placed upon them for that aspect of their life. So that's a big thing that people have to kind of deconstruct from and heal from and recover from. So I got really involved in that, and I loved doing that in those channels. And I was still participating in RfRX, and they eventually had me start hosting the Hangouts, which was a lot of fun. We did that for, I think the first episode where I hosted the Hangout was when we had a guest who was trans. And so they were like, oh, this will be a good one for Kara. And so that's how I got into it. And then they let me come back. Foolish you for letting me return. And then I took over in a mass coup.
It's all part of your plan.
Was all part of my evil plans. And then, yeah, that's most of what I do now, is the stuff to do with RfRX. And here we all are.
And the title Online Program Director, right? So you're responsible, you're a board member, right?
Yes, I'm also a board member. I'm the treasurer on the board. And
Oh,
then
the treasurer also.
Yes. That was...
So where do we get our money from, since we're a nonprofit? How does that work? I have not
Great
paid
question.
any attention to the financial part of all this.
So we get it from donations. People will donate. Oftentimes people will donate just like a certain amount every month. You can set it up if you go to the website. You can set it up to where you donate in PayPal, a few dollars a month. And that's actually the bulk of our income coming in, is from those just monthly donation subscriptions. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. People will donate $5 a month, $10 a month, $3 a month, I think. I don't know if there's any lower limit on how much you can put per month. It's probably any amount. We do also sometimes get large donations when someone may, find out about our work or decide they want to donate to a charitable cause. And sometimes people will write us, a large check and say, I just found out about this. Or sometimes, this really impacted me, or I was really helped by this, or this is touching a community that I see has a great need. And we'll get, a large donation sometimes that way. And then we also periodically will have fundraisers. Like earlier this year, we did one with The Line. They have done a fundraiser for us a few years in a row. And a lot of the other secular podcasters and online personalities will help promote us and get the word out. And that's another way that we get our income. We may have another fundraiser coming up soon. So stay tuned for that.
So what do the funds go for? What do we spend this money on?
Yes, great question. So because it is a nonprofit, and all of our people who work here are volunteers, all of the services are run by volunteers, so we're not paying people to answer the helpline, for instance, or to moderate the online community, or to run the support groups. Those are volunteers. But what we do need money for is to basically keep all of those services up and running. So we have to have all of the software to operate the weekly meetings, to have the support group meetings. You need to have your subscription to Zoom or to Meetup. We need to have our telephone service and our online chat system. That's a service that you have to pay for. And we also have things like the Fall Excursion, where we have people come out and get together in person and connect with one another. And we have Basically all of the costs that go into running an organization, we still have those. Even though the people work here for free, we still have to keep the lights on, and keep all of the programs and services running. So it helps us have the support groups for people, something like, what are we up to, like 40 a month support groups. We have the weekly RfRX, we have the online community, we have the fall excursions and the, one-off events, as well as, helping to get information and materials out to people. We have our ambassadors that will go out to events and give people information about the program, and sometimes we have people who will give a talk or a presentation at a relevant event. So all that kind of stuff.
And I know I think it was last year, they put up a billboard.
Yes, we have had billboards as well, to help people find out about the services, particularly if it's in a place right when something has happened that may result in increased need for people recovering from religion.
All right. So, and lastly, you have to talk about RFRX talks. Like, so what is that about? What do we do there?
So I'm so glad you asked. We have these talks every Monday night. And, well, it's Monday night in U.S. time. If you're in a different time zone, it could be Tuesday morning or some other time of day for you. But what we do is we have a guest who comes on every week who talks about a topic that we think is going to be relevant to folks who are recovering from religion. And we have either a presentation from that guest about a topic, like it might be about a scientific topic, or it might be about critical thinking, or it might be about some kind of, psychological aspect of recovering from religion, or it might be someone who has a new book that came out that's about a relevant secular topic. And then sometimes we have ones where we have people come on and tell their story of how they deconstructed, and we learn about some of the different faith backgrounds that people have come from. Sometimes we have people come on who are representing an organization or a program or a service or a nonprofit that people can access. And so we do that. We talk with that person for about an hour, and then we have a Q&A session. And then we have a hangout after the show where the audience that's attending live can actually interact with the guest for however long they're able to stay, and with us, the hosts, which lately it's been you and me. And we also have several other great co-hosts and hangout hosts who are there every single week to help make sure it happens and to chat with people. And it's become like it's part of my Monday night. We say Monday's the best night of the week because we get to have RfRX and see all our people, and it's a lot of fun. So you too can tune in on Monday night. Just go to Recovering from Religion and click on the online media tab and click RfRX Talks, and you can join us.
Yes, that's a great promo for RFRX Talks. And we're about to switch platforms, but it won't change much the experience for people. It'll just give more people a chance to watch it on YouTube. We haven't been streaming it live to YouTube, and we're going to start doing that.
Yes, that's right. That's super exciting. So people won't have to wait, for us to record the episode and then go through post-production and then put it up on YouTube later. They can just watch it live and it'll be there.
Yeah,
so
but
we hope, assuming this transition works out, that's the plan.
This is actually the first official thing that's being recorded on this platform, which is, by the way, Riverside, if anyone cares. I think that's true. I think that's true.
Look at us go.
Yeah. So, and by the way, if you can't join the RFRX show live, you can find most all of the previous episodes up on the YouTube channel. Like Cara said, it takes a month or two for them to do editing, but there's 250 something there now, and the list is ever growing. So you can you can find that by going to RFRX Talks page, as Cara directed you, and then at the top it says see the YouTube playlist. And then you can just scroll through the titles and see if you'd like to watch any of those. We don't record the Hangout that Cara mentioned, when people can unmute themselves and talk live, because that, we don't do the recording of the guest gallery initially, because people a lot of times want to still stay, in the closet, so to speak, and they don't want people in their family or friends to see that they're on and watching Recovering from Religion. But so we don't record that. But when we get to the hangout, people can openly speak because it's not being recorded. So yeah.
That's right. And that's a really good point, too, that sometimes people are kind of nervous to join because they're like, I don't want to join a Zoom meeting of atheists. Like, I didn't say I'm an atheist. I was just curious about this topic. Like, I'm not trying to, like, come to the meeting. You can just log into Zoom with your camera
Right.
off. You don't have to use your real name or anything. If you're a troll, we will find you, and we have our senior troll stomper, Glinda, will help you find the exit. But it is perfectly okay to just be in the background lurking with your camera off. You don't have to participate. We're not
Right.
going to call you out or go around and do introductions or anything like that. You can just come watch and participate as much as you want to participate or not at all. And that's totally fine. No pressure to, go around the room and everyone say something interesting about themselves. No,
Yeah,
absolutely
it's not a support group, which you might be asked if you want to do that in a support group. That's the other thing we do, but the hangouts are not that. So
No,
yeah,
not at all.
so
So,
okay,
yeah, low pressure.
all right. So I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much, Cara, for being my first guest on the series.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I can't wait for more episodes of the series, and I will be looking forward to watching this one when it comes out.